He was just a quiet cowboy, never asking for more than peace on the frontier. But the night he saved her from bandits, everything changed. Because before the fire burned low, she was at his cabin door, begging for more. The wind came off the mountains sharp and bitter, carrying with it the smell of pine and the promise of snow. James Callahan tugged his coat tighter as he urged his horse down the narrow trail that wound through the frozen timber. He had meant only to ride into town that day for flour, coffee, and a length of fence wire. But fate had other notions. He first heard the voices before he saw anything. Angry men, rough laughter, the shuffle of boots over frozen ground. Then a woman's cry cut through the stillness, thin and terrified. James reined in his horse hard, listening. Somewhere down near the dry creek bed, trouble was brewing. James wasn't a man who sought out company, let alone fights. Folks in town called him the quiet one, a rancher who kept to himself since losing most of his herd in the harsh winter, 2 years back. But a woman's scream was not the kind of thing a man could ignore, no matter how solitary his ways. He rode carefully, tying his horse among the trees before moving on foot toward the voices. 3 men stood in the clearing, bandits by the look of them. Their coats were ragged, guns at their belts, faces unshaven. One of them had hold of a young woman's arm, his grip cruel enough to make her cry out again. James's jaw tightened. She was no town lady by the look of her. Dust on her hem, dark hair loose around her shoulders, dress torn as though she had been running. She was trying to fight them off, but fear showed plain in her flushed cheeks. "Let go of her," James called out, voice steady though his hand hovered near his revolver. The men turned, surprised, then laughed at the sight of him. One lone cowboy in a worn hat. "You best ride on, stranger," one of them sneered. "This ain't your concern." James stepped forward, gun clearing leather in one smooth motion. "It is now." Things moved fast then. One bandit reached for his pistol, but James fired first. The crack echoed off the frozen timber, and the man fell. The second lunged, but James's shot dropped him too. The last cursed, dragging the woman in front of him like a shield. "Back off or I'll put her down with me," the outlaw barked, pressing his gun to her temple. The young woman froze, eyes wide in terror. James's hand steadied, though his pulse thundered in his ears. He shifted his stance just enough, reading the outlaw's grip. Then, with a flash of steel in his gaze, James fired. The outlaw jerked, his bullet going wide into the snow. The woman stumbled free, gasping, while the man crumpled at her feet. Silence followed, only the cold wind moving through the pines. The woman turned to him slowly, her hands trembling. You saved me." James holstered his revolver, studying her with concern. "You hurt?" She shook her head, though tears blurred her eyes. "No, just shaken." He offered his hand, and after a pause, she took it. Her fingers were icy cold. They didn't speak much on the ride back. James gave her his coat, and she rode behind him on his horse, arms around his waist, shivering against his back as the snow began to fall. He did not press her with questions. She seemed too raw, too fragile to endure them. By the time they reached his cabin, night had settled deep, the world outside muffled by snow. The cabin sat against the trees, firelight glowing faintly through the cracks around the shutters. James helped her down, steadying her when her knees buckled. Inside, the warmth and crackle of firelight seemed to soften her face a little. She sank onto the rough bench near the hearth, clutching his coat around her shoulders. He poured her a cup of hot coffee and she drank with trembling hands. At last she spoke, her voice hoarse. "My name is Clara." James nodded. "James Callahan." She glanced toward the door as though still expecting shadows to follow her. Then her eyes returned to him, wide and pleading. "Please, don't send me away tonight. If I'm out there alone, I'll die." James hesitated, caught off guard by the desperation in her tone. He had planned only to see her safe for the night, maybe guide her toward town in the morning. But the way she leaned forward, clutching the front of his shirt as though her life depended on it, made something twist in his chest. "You'll stay," he said at last, voice quiet but firm. "No one's coming near you here." Her grip eased, but her eyes searched his face. "Promise me," she whispered. You won't let anyone take me back." James studied her in the flickering firelight, his mind turning with unspoken questions. Who had she been running from? Where had she come from before those bandits? And what was she so afraid of being taken back to? He didn't ask, not yet. Instead, he rose and fetched a blanket, spreading it across the cot near the hearth. "You can have the bed," he said. "I'll keep watch." She looked at him long, her face caught between gratitude and something deeper. Then slowly she lay down, pulling the blanket to her chin. But even as her eyes closed, James could see how her hands still trembled. The fire burned low, shadows dancing against the log walls. James sat in his chair, revolver laid across his knees, staring into the flames. He had lived alone for so long, had thought his life would pass quietly among the cattle and pines. Yet tonight, everything had changed in the span of an hour. Clara shifted on the cot, whispering his name in her sleep as though even in dreams she sought his protection. James leaned back, watching over her, knowing that by morning the quiet life he once knew would be gone. Outside, the snow deepened, erasing all tracks from the trail. Whatever Clara had fled from was hidden for now, but not forever, and as James sat there in the flickering firelight, he realized with a slow, steady certainty the true danger hadn't yet come. Snow fell all through the night, blanketing the mountains in silence. By morning, James's cabin was sealed in a world of white. The storm had left drifts up past the fence rails, and smoke from the chimney curled lazily into a sky the color of pewter. James stepped outside early, boots crunching, the cold biting his cheeks. He cut wood for the fire, the rhythm steady and grounding, though his thoughts kept circling back to the woman asleep inside. Clara. When he re-entered, she was awake, sitting at the edge of the cot with the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. In the daylight, she looked different, pale from exhaustion, but her dark eyes held a quiet strength beneath the fear. "You didn't sleep much," she said softly, noting the shadows beneath his eyes. "Didn't need to," James replied, setting down the wood. "How are you feeling?" Clara hesitated, then managed. "Safe, for the first time in weeks." Her voice cracked on that last word. He wanted to ask, safe from what? From whom? But he kept his questions tucked away. People told their truths in their own time, and he reckoned forcing her wouldn't do any good. She watched him a moment, then whispered, "You saved me yesterday. If you hadn't—" She shook her head, pressing her hands tighter around the blanket. "I can't even bear to think what would have happened." James busied himself at the stove, pouring coffee into a tin cup, sliding it toward her. "Don't dwell on it. What matters is you're here now." Clara accepted the cup with both hands, eyes shining as though she might weep again. But she held it back, sipping quietly. The day passed in small rhythms. James mended a saddle strap. Clara helped where she could, washing dishes, sweeping the floor, moving carefully as though afraid to overstep. At times, silence hung heavy between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire. But it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of hush that grows between people who have both lived with too many storms inside. That evening, after supper of beans and bread, Clara finally began to speak. "I wasn't always out there, alone." She stared into the flames, voice soft but steady. "My family moved west 2 years ago. My father took work with a cattle outfit near Coulter's Pass. Mama sewed for the ranch wives. We didn't have much, but we managed." Her eyes dimmed. "Then last spring, Pa fell from a horse and broke his back. He didn't last long. Mama got sick not long after, fever that took her quick. It was just me after that. I tried to hold on to the little cabin, but I couldn't keep up the payments. I sold what I could, and when there was nothing left," her hands tightened in her lap, "I took work at a tavern outside of town." James's chest tightened. He knew what such work could mean for a young woman alone. She glanced at him quickly, as though gauging judgment in his eyes. But James only nodded, waiting. "I served drinks, scrubbed floors, tried to keep to myself. But the men there, Some of them wouldn't leave me be. One of the owners, especially. Her breath hitched. When I refused him, he said he'd see to it no one else would hire me. He started sending men to follow me home. I knew it was only a matter of time before something worse happened. So I ran. I've been on the road near 2 weeks. James leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Those men yesterday? Clara nodded faintly. I recognized one. He worked for the tavern owner. They weren't just after me by chance. Silence pressed in, heavy with the truth. James studied her, the firelight softening the sharp lines of her face. She looked worn down, yes, but also unbroken. You were right to run, he said finally. And you were lucky I found you when I did. Her eyes lifted to his, wide and earnest. I don't feel lucky, James. Not yet. I keep thinking they'll find me. Men like that don't let go easy. He didn't argue. He knew she was right. The snow covered tracks, but when the thaw came, trails would open again. And if word spread in town, it wouldn't take much for the wrong men to trace her. That night, as the fire burned low, Clara stirred uneasily on the cot. James, she whispered in the dark. Why did you help me? He thought a long time before answering. Because you needed it. And because a man ought to stand against wrong when he sees it. There was silence, then a soft sniffle. Most men would have turned away. James's voice was low, steady. I ain't most men. He heard her settle then, her breathing evening out. But long after she drifted into sleep, James sat awake, listening to the wind scrape along the cabin walls, his hand resting near his revolver. 2 days passed like that, Clara growing stronger, James quietly watching over her. They settled into a rhythm almost like kin, though the air between them carried an undercurrent neither named. A glance here, a wordless pause there. Something fragile, unspoken. But on the third morning, tracks appeared in the snow down by the tree line. Fresh boot prints. James knelt, studying them, the muscles in his jaw hardening. At least 3 men, maybe 4, moving cautiously, circling close. He straightened slowly, scanning the quiet woods. Whoever they were, they'd come searching. And it wasn't hard to guess who they were looking for. When he returned to the cabin, Clara was at the stove, stirring a pot of coffee. She looked up at him, smiling faintly, until she saw his face. The smile slipped. What is it? She asked. Voice tight. James set his hat on the table, his eyes never leaving hers. We've got company. Clara's hand stilled, the spoon clattering against the tin pot. Her lips parted, but no words came. James reached for his rifle, checking the chamber, every movement calm and deliberate. Clara, he said quietly, whatever happens, you stay inside. Do you understand? Her voice broke. They've found me. And though James said nothing more, the look in his eyes told her everything. He would stand between her and danger, no matter the cost. The knock at the cabin door came just as the snow began falling again. The knock rattled the wooden door like a drumbeat against Clara's chest. She froze where she stood, her hand still hovering near the stove. James motioned her back with a sharp tilt of his head. She obeyed, retreating until her shoulders pressed the log wall, her breath shallow. James crossed the room slow, rifle cradled in his arms, boots silent on the plank floor. He paused a step from the door, listening. Who's there? His voice was calm, even, but carried steel beneath. A man's tone came through, muffled but clear. Travelers caught in the storm. We'd be obliged for a bit of fire and a hot drink. James's jaw tightened. The words were polite, but the cadence was wrong. He knew a drifter's call when he heard one. These men weren't asking. They were circling like wolves. Don't open it, Clara whispered, voice trembling. James didn't. He shifted to the window instead, pulling the curtain back just enough to peer outside. Shapes moved in the snow, 3, maybe 4 men, rifles slung, hats low. One leaned against a pine as though he had no hurry in the world. They weren't travelers. They were hunting. James let the curtain fall. Keep quiet, he told Clara, and stay back. The knock came again, harder. We know you're in there, cowboy. and we reckon you've got someone we're looking for." Clara's face drained of color. Her lips parted, but James lifted a hand to silence her. He stood at the door, voice low but carrying. "You got the wrong place. Best move along." A harsh laugh cut through the storm. "Don't play dumb, mister. We seen the tracks. Girl don't belong to you. She belongs to Mr. Tanner, and he sent us to fetch what's his." Clara flinched as if struck. James turned just enough to meet her wide, terrified eyes. The fear in them told him all he needed. These men weren't bluffing. His gut hardened. "Ain't no man owns another," he called back, voice like flint. The pause outside stretched taut. Then the leader spoke again, voice low and cold. "That's a mighty bold answer, stranger. Boldness gets men killed." Snow whispered against the cabin roof, the silence thick as gun oil. James slid the rifle strap firm against his shoulder. He spoke to Clara without looking. "Go to the back room. Don't come out unless I tell you." Her hand caught his sleeve. "They'll kill you," she breathed. He shook his head once. "Not if I kill them first." His tone was flat, not boasting, just a man stating fact. Reluctantly, Clara pulled back, vanishing into the shadows of the rear room. James waited until he heard the faint click of the latch. Then he drew a slow breath and swung the door wide. The storm rushed in, sharp and cold. 3 men stood in the snow, rifles loose in their hands. The one in front was lean, with a scar, splitting his cheek. He grinned, though it never touched his eyes. "Evenin'," Scar said. "We'll make this easy. Step aside and hand over the girl." James leaned against the doorframe, rifle resting easy in his hands, eyes steady. "Not gonna happen." Scar's smile slipped. "You don't know who you're crossing, cowboy." "Don't need to," James replied. "All I know is the girl's under my roof, and while she's here, no harm's coming to her." The man beside Scar spat into the snow. "Then we take her off your corpse." Time snapped like a whip. James fired first. The crack split the night, the recoil kicking into his shoulder. One of the men dropped into the snow, rifle clattering from numb hands. Gunfire exploded in reply. James ducked back inside, a bullet, splintering the doorframe. He rolled to the side, chambering another round. The walls shook with the thunder of lead. From the back room, Clara stifled a cry. She pressed both hands over her mouth, heart slamming. James moved with grim precision, sliding to the window, raising the rifle. Another shot. Another man staggered back, howling, clutching his arm. Scar cursed, diving for cover behind a drift. For minutes, the storm swallowed the sounds of battle, the crack of rifles, the grunt of men, the hiss of snow. When the smoke cleared, 2 bodies lay still. Another wounded crawled away into the pines. Scar remained, crouched low, breath steaming in the bitter air. James stepped outside, boots sinking deep into the snow. His rifle tracked steady on Scar. "End it here," he called, "or I swear you won't walk away." Scar's laugh was ragged, bitter. "You think this is over? Tanner's got more men than you got bullets. Girl's marked. Ain't nowhere she can run." He backed toward the trees, eyes burning with promise. "We'll be back, cowboy, and next time we'll bring enough to burn you out." Then he vanished into the storm, leaving only silence and blood on the snow. James lowered his rifle slowly. His breath came heavy, misting in the frozen air. He turned back to the cabin. Clara stood at the doorway, pale, trembling. "You're bleeding," she gasped, rushing to him. James looked down, a graze along his shoulder where a bullet had kissed flesh. He'd hardly felt it in the fight. "It's nothing," he muttered, though his knees felt weak. Clara guided him inside, pressing him into the chair by the fire. With trembling hands, she tore strips from her own dress hem, binding the wound as best she could. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling despite her effort. "They won't stop, James. He'll send more. You can't fight them all." James caught her wrists gently, stilling her frantic motion. "Look at me," he said softly. She lifted her tearful gaze. "We'll figure a way. I won't let them take you. Do you hear me?" Her lips trembled. "Why? Why risk your life for me? You don't even know me." James's eyes held hers, steady. unflinching. Because no woman deserves chains. And because maybe I know you better than you think. Clara's breath hitched, her hands trembling in his. For a moment, the world shrank to just the two of them. The firelight, the storm beyond, and the fragile thread of trust binding them closer. But outside, in the endless dark, Scar was already making his way back to Tanner with news. And when Tanner heard that his men had been killed, his fury would blaze hotter than any storm. Clara sensed it too. She pressed her forehead to James's shoulder, whispering, "This isn't over." And James, staring into the fire with eyes hard as iron, knew she was right. The storm eased by morning, leaving the valley under a heavy quilt of white. Smoke curled from James's chimney, rising against the pale sky. Inside, the cabin smelled of coffee and wood smoke. But beneath the quiet there was a sharp tension that neither James nor Clara could ignore. Clara sat at the table, pale, her dark hair loose about her shoulders. She sipped the coffee with both hands, as though it might steady her shaking. Across from her, James tightened the strap of his bandaged shoulder and stared into the fire. Neither spoke for a time. The silence pressed like a weight. Finally, Clara broke it, her voice hushed. "He'll come, Mr. Tanner. Scar was right. He won't let this go." James's jaw flexed, though he kept his eyes on the flames. "Then we'll be ready." Clara shook her head, tears springing again. "You don't understand him. Tanner. He doesn't just want me back. He wants to make an example. He'll come with a dozen men, maybe more. He'll kill you, burn this place, and drag me back, like a trophy." James leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Then it's time you told me the whole of it. What hold does he think he's got on you?" Clara swallowed hard, her knuckles white against the cup. At last she whispered, "My father owed him money. Too much. Tanner offered to clear the debt if I agreed to marry him. I was desperate. I thought maybe I could endure it, for my family's sake. But once I was under his roof," she shuddered. "It wasn't a marriage. It was a prison. He said I was his property now, that no law out here would protect me. So I ran." Her eyes lifted, shining with pain and shame. "I know what folks say about women who run, but I couldn't stay. I'd rather die than go back." James studied her a long moment. His voice, when it came, was low but firm. "You did right, and no decent soul would call it otherwise." Clara blinked, tears spilling down her cheeks. He didn't say it out of pity, but conviction, and it steadied her more than any warm drink could. She set the cup down. "But you can't fight him alone. Please, James, leave me here. He doesn't want you. He only wants me." James straightened, meeting her gaze. His eyes were calm, but there was something fierce in them. "You listen to me. I've buried too many good people to stand by while a man like Tanner takes another. You're under my roof, Clara. That means you're under my protection, and I'll die before I hand you over." Her breath caught. She wanted to protest, but the words tangled in her throat. For the first time in months, perhaps years, she felt the fragile spark of safety. But safety was short-lived. By afternoon, James's dog, a wiry cattle hound named Bristle, began barking toward the ridge. James stepped out into the snow, rifle in hand, and saw them, riders. At least 10, dark figures moving slow but steady down the white slopes, Tanner's men. Clara appeared at the doorway, her hand gripping the frame. She saw them too, and her face went pale. James turned back, calm and deliberate. "Pack what you can carry. We can't hold the cabin against that many. We'll head through the North Pass." Clara hesitated. "In this snow? Where will we go?" "Doesn't matter. Away from here, alive." He didn't waste another word. Together they gathered what little they could, blankets, dried meat, cartridges, and James's old saddlebag. Clara tucked a small locket into her dress pocket, her only keepsake. By dusk, they were on horseback, riding hard into the shadow of the pines. Snow muffled the world around them, but behind, James knew Tanner's men were closing fast. The pass, was narrow, a trail carved between jagged cliffs and thick trees. It was dangerous in winter, but it was the only chance. James rode ahead, rifle across his saddle, eyes scanning every shadow. Clara clung to the reins of her mare, her breath steaming in the frozen air. Hours passed in a blur of hooves and frost. At last, when Clara thought she could ride no further, James slowed, raising a hand. They reached a ledge that overlooked the trail below. From here, they could see the torchlights of riders winding through the snow, Tanner's men closing. And James dismounted, pulling Clara down gently. "We make our stand here." Clara's voice shook. "There are too many. Then we fight smart." He set her against the rocks, pressing his revolver into her hands. "If they reach you, you shoot. Don't hesitate." Her fingers closed around the weapon, trembling. "I've never fired a gun." "Then tonight, you learn. Aim low. Breathe steady." Before she could answer, hoofbeats thundered nearer. Torches bobbed below, voices carrying in the still night. Then one voice rose above the rest, deep, cruel, unmistakable. "Clara." Her blood froze. "Tanner." He rode at the head, a heavy-set man with a black coat and a pistol glinting at his side. His eyes scanned the cliffs until they fixed on the ledge. He grinned, shouting up, "You can't hide from me, girl. You're mine. And the man beside you is already dead." Clara's breath came ragged, but James stepped forward, rifle braced against the rocks. His voice rang out cold and steady. "She ain't yours, Tanner. Not now, not ever." A gunshot cracked the night. Tanner's men roared, spurring forward. Firelight lit the snow as bullets ripped against the cliff. James returned fire, his shots ringing with deadly precision. One rider tumbled from his saddle, another reared back, screaming. Chaos erupted. Smoke and snow tangled as gunfire split the pass. Clara crouched low, heart hammering, clutching the revolver. James moved like a man possessed, firing, ducking, reloading. He shouted for her to stay down, but she saw Tanner himself riding closer, shouting orders, his pistol aimed straight at James. Something fierce rose in her chest. She raised the revolver, arms shaking, sight fixed on Tanner's broad figure. She thought of her father, her lost years, the chains of that man's promise. She pulled the trigger. The shot cracked louder than thunder in her ears. Tanner jerked back in the saddle, bellowing, clutching his arm. His pistol fell to the snow. James seized the moment. He fired once, clean and true. Tanner toppled from his horse, hitting the ground with a heavy thud. Silence swept the pass, broken only by the panicked retreat of his men. The battle was over. Clara lowered the revolver, trembling all over. Her ears rang. Her breath came in gasps. James dropped beside her, gripping her shoulders. "You did it," he said, voice rough but proud. "You saved us." Tears blurred her vision. "I was so afraid." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, steady and gentle. "Fear's what keeps you alive. Courage is what makes you fight anyway. You've got both." For a long moment they sat there, the snow falling quiet around them. Tanner's body, lying still below. At last Clara whispered, "It's over, isn't it?" James looked out over the empty trail, the torchlights gone. His arm slipped around her shoulders, pulling her close. "It's over." The two of them rode down from the pass. By dawn, the world washed clean under the rising sun. Clara leaned against him in the saddle, exhaustion pulling her eyes closed, but her heart lighter than it had been in years. James glanced at her, at the peace softening her face. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Folks might whisper, trouble might follow. But for the first time, he allowed himself to think of a life not just endured, but shared. When they reached the cabin again, firelight flickering against the snow, Clara turned to him, voice soft. "Thank you, James, for giving me back my life." He met her gaze, the weight of all that had passed between them hanging unspoken. "Reckon you gave me one too." And in that quiet, with the storm behind and the dawn before, a bond was sealed. Born, not of chance, but of courage, sacrifice, and a love that felt as real and enduring as the land itself.